prevalence of mental health conditions has spiked in the past 30 years, specifically amongst adolescents. There are numerous underlying factors to this increase, many of which are well known and extensively researched. However, the relationship between early life stresses, the structural and functional changes that occur as a result are less well known and worthy of the research.
Okay.
The regulating of one's emotions is an essential role of an individual's mental health. The HPA axis is located primarily in the prefrontal cortex and connects to the adrenal cortex located just above the kidney. It is composed of three individual parts, which gives the axis its name. The three elements play a role in the endocrine system, the first of which is the hypothalamus. Due to stress, it releases CRH to the anterior pituitary. The anterior pituitary is then activated to release AH. Both processes occur in the prefrontal cortex, which leads us to the last phase. Now, the anterior pituitary sends AH to the adrenal cortex, which is found just above the kidney, and this is where the hormone cortisol is produced. This is an illustrative and significant example of the impact and control the brain has on body functions and the regulation of all aspects of life. Cortisol is the end product of this process and has been proven to directly influence the brain regions that are responsible for regulating emotions. It is theorized that early life stresses, ELS, when paired with the early activation of the HPA axis, may cause individuals to have a higher level of risk of depression and anxiety. This is specifically relevant to females and can occur throughout the lifespan. What are early life stresses? Early life stresses include child abuse, neglect, or loss of parent or guardian. Berge states that a particular individual's childhood experiences, including a combination of premature exposure to ESL and the timing and magnitude of the event that has taken place, may cause a heightened production of cortisol. So why does this increase in cortisol mean? Well, if you increase the production of cortisol in your body due to stress during early development years, say as a child, it can lead to individuals becoming socially impaired and displaying signs of struggling to regulate their emotions. Because of this, throughout the adolescent phase, individuals with these similar characteristics can then develop into having forms of anxiety or depression. This then consequently leads to an increased chance of individuals developing a further mental health complications throughout adulthood. Today I'm going to take you through two case studies. Both observe the relationship between cortisol levels and depression and anxiety. The first of which is a case study conducted by Berge in 2012. The study involved 57 participants, 28 of which were females. These participants were picked from a larger pool of 570 females. The focus of Berge's study was based on the prediction that early life stresses would further lead to an increase in cortisol levels in children when exposed to these stresses, and that these two factors in conjunction with one another would create a variancy in the rest state functional connectivity. In adolescence, RSFC is an important agent in detecting levels of anxiety. If a participant has decreased or low levels of connectivity while being at rest, it is an indication of high anxiety. Berger used a technique in his study to measure the RSFC called functional connectivity magnetic resonance imaging. The study consisted of 3 stages. In the first stage, the participants were exposed to maternal stresses and it was measured in 3 segments and averaged out: 1 month, 4 months, and a year of age. The secondary stage of study happened at the average age of participants was 4.5 years old. The children's parents obtained samples of the children's saliva over 3-day time frame between the times 3 and 7 o'clock. From these samples, they then measured the basal cortisol levels of the individuals. And then the final stage of research occurred as the participants entered the adolescence phase. During this stage, they ran a series of tests which included another 3-day time frame collection of basal cortisol levels, both functional and structural imaging using an MRI, a self-report psychiatric, and current life stresses evaluation. The results in the study conclude that the higher evening cortisol level in the children, they can predict a decrease in the rest state functional connectivity, still 14 years later. This demonstrates the long-term effects that early life stresses and early activation of the HPA axis has on an individual's mental health from childhood through to adulthood. Another case study that detected the theory that early activation of the HPA due to early life stresses was a study conducted by Warren Bay in 2014. Warren Bay also explores the link between MR agonist and GR agonist and the production of cortisol hormone. There were 20 participants that had been diagnosed with major depression that participated in the study, as well as 10 healthy participants which also acted as a control in the study. They were divided up into 2 separate groups according to early life stress history. This was determined by a childhood trauma questionnaire. As Berge's study, participants of this experiment also had their cortisol levels measured through saliva samples. On day 1, each participant was directed to take a placebo capsule at 10 p.m. This was then followed by a cortisol level test. Day 4, 48 hours after taking the first capsule, participants were then instructed to take a second capsule at the same time as the first capsule, 10 p.m. This was used to test the effects of the cortisol levels. This was again followed by the same cortisol test. On day 7, participants were given a third capsule at 10 p.m. and they repeated the cortisol test. This was used to compare to the MR agonist and the placebo. The results of Warren Bay studies confirmed that there was a high positive correlation between cortisol levels and the magnitude of the early life stresses in participants diagnosed with major depression, but no correlation with the healthy participants' cortisol levels. There was little to no difference in the scores of the CTQ from the participants to the control. As reported by the CTQ, more than 50%, 13 out of 20 of the patients, had suffered from some subtype of early life stresses. 11 experienced emotional abuse, 10 reported physical neglect, 9 emotional neglect, 9 physical abuse, 7 sexual abuse. After placebo, participants' cortisol level was significantly lower than the control participants. Patients experienced a higher suppression by the MR agonist, but similar suppression by the GR agonist in comparison to the control group. Right? Now, what does all this mean? Why is this relevant? Depression and anxiety in adolescents has increased drastically over the past few decades. It is important to be able to distinguish what is the cause of this increase, as well as source a way in which to help decrease further cases. Early life stresses and premature production of cortisol may be significant in this increase, and therefore deserves research and understanding. By researching the HPA axis and the causes for its early activation, we can help prevent overproduction as well as the premature production of cortisol in children and adolescents, which research shows can lead to decreased symptoms of depression and anxiety.